Hey guys, it's Baileywiki, and for the tutorial today, I'm going to show you something pretty crazy. It's also going to be really useful, I think, for most of you. If you use Monk's Active Tiles, if you design any scenes in Foundry, if you use levels, token magic effects, I mean, you name it, the stuff that I show you guys how to use, if you do that, I think you're going to find this really, really useful. What we're going to use today as a backdrop is the bio ship. This is a something that came out in my release today, and it's made from a bunch of pieces, as you guys know. And it was inspired by Baldur's Gate 3, a little bit by the Nautiloid, but clearly this is like a steel version of it. And I wanted to really create a biological version. So we're going to use this as a way for me to show you this new, really a feature of an existing module. Now the module is called Mass Edit. And if you guys have been following me, you know it's my most important module. I think it's the most important module introduced this year if you're going to manage things in Foundry. And we want to use a new feature of Mass Edit to basically make all the things that we do more repeatable and be able to like do things like building traps and stuff like that really quickly. So you can hear some of the sounds and see some of the things that are going on in our ship here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my tile layer, and then I'm going to hit Shift X. I could also just press this little button over here, and it's going to bring up this placeables presets window. Now if you just install this, you're not going to have anything here populated, but let me just show you what we're going to do. So I want to select all of my tiles here on this whole scene. In fact, I've got specific tiles that I want to search for. And so I'm going to search for all of them now. And I'm just going to search by a tag that I used. Okay, I've got all those selected. Now I'm going to go over here to Overlay Effects, Biological. I got this new one called Overlay Sinew. And I'm going to right click it. I'm going to say Copy to Clipboard. And then I'm going to hit, with all of these selected, and I've got my window open, I'm going to hit Control V. Now, what that did was it applied this overlay effect. And this overlay effect is really a couple of things. If we go into Edit, we go into like delete fields, for example, we can see the two fields. I have token magic effects filter applied, and then I've got a tint applied to the underlying tile. And what it essentially did was applied an overlay texture. And that overlay texture is this kind of muscly sinew type of texture, already getting us moving in the right direction. And that is what a preset is, in this case for tiles. But you can see you can have presets for every other kind of entity in the game. So let's keep going in our transformation and demonstrate some of these other ones. Now you heard that hydraulic sound just a second ago with that door. Let's look for other doors. We'll do Shift F to find, and we'll look for doors with this futuristic, fast sound effect to it. And now I'm going to, now that they're all selected, see all my doors are selected, I am going to go to my wall layer, special walls, and I have this flesh wall here. I know it sounds terrible, but let's go ahead and copy that to the clipboard, and then we'll hit Control V. All right, you heard my little flesh sound in the background. Let's test it out. So I'll walk up here. Very, very satisfying. Okay. By the way, I do use a special module to make that door customizable. It's a customized sound. It's using door sounds, I think, from Freeze, if I got that right. All right, so let's keep going. Let's look for lights now. So we'll go to our light layer, and let's look for this light. We'll do all the lights with this tag on it. And with all those selected, we're going to open up our prefab thing again. This time it automatically moves us to the lighting layer. That's one of the functions that it does. And we've got this bio ship light. So we'll copy this to the clipboard, and then I'll hit Control V. There, now we're starting to look a lot more like Baldur's Gate 3. See that? Pretty interesting, right? All right, so now if you've ever worked with like overhead tiles, right? We've all worked with overhead tiles. It can be really frustrating because there's so many settings that you need to worry about. Like, is it a roof? Is it not a roof? What are all the settings on this tab? I'm going to select all of my overhead tiles here because I want my players to have a certain amount of, overhead stuff going on. I think it makes for a really good effect. So now that I've got them selected, I'm going to open this up again. This time I'm going to go to to my levels folder that I've created. And I want most of these to allow light. So I'm going to use this one, copy to the clipboard, hit Control V, and you didn't probably notice what happened, but let's just grab a token. So now my tokens can go underneath these overhead tiles, and I think it just makes for a really, really cool effect. Okay, so now let's look at also Monk's active tiles. So I'm in this like nautiloid tank room, right? And I've got these cool nautiloid tanks. And when I click on a lid, it basically closes the tank, right? Otherwise, with the lid off to players, it's going to look like something like this, right? So I can hide and actually put tokens, players, or enemies or whatever inside these tanks. And I really love that whole effect. So, but, I coded this, top lid to do a couple of things, right? So anyone or GM specifically can double click it, even when it's paused. It will play a sound and it'll toggle this tile on and off. So if I wanted to create a tile out of this, there's two ways I could do it. I'll show you way number one. If you hit Shift E, that opens up the token edit or mass edit display. And then I can select the things that I want to copy over. So in this case, I want to copy over everything about the overhead tile. And if I right click, it selects everything on that tab. I want to select all these triggers. And notice it selects everything on these sub tabs as well. Okay. Otherwise, I could go in here and just toggle some of these things off and just select the things that I want. But I'm going to say this is what I want for all of my lids. I'm going to go ahead and click, instead of apply, I'm going to click this little button. It looks like a box here. You're presented then with this option to create a preset. So let's do that. And let's call this preset. We'll right click it and we'll call it, actually, it probably gave me a dialog. Yep, gave me a dialog underneath. We'll call this tank lid. And we're just going to look at a couple of these fields. First of all, we can give it a thumbnail if I want to give it something more permanent. I can come in here and change some of the options. So notice it's brought everything over and it shows me what it brought over. So I can change some of those things. I can also delete fields. So if there's things about this tank lid that I don't want to copy over into other things, I can delete them here. But you can see it brought all of my Monk's active tile flags over, and that's exactly what I want. Because I'm using this button, it's allowing me to be very specific on what I'm bringing over. And then let's say that there was a value that I wanted to change every time I created a new tank lid. Well, I can select those values here. Like, let's say I wanted to, decide if it was going to be an overhead tile or not, or if I wanted some other value that I could change, I can just select any number here, hit Control, or you can press Shift and select a bunch of things. I'm not going to do that here. It's really cool though, when you drop it in, you can change like the size of a tile, for example, or change the tile image. But we're going to go with this as the tank lid. We'll hit apply, and that creates now our prefab for tank lid. Then we can come over here to all of its friends that are all the same, open up my presets again, go to tank lid, I'm going to right click and say copy to keyboard, and then I'm going to hit Control V. Now, if I click on one of these, I should see all of the same triggers, all the same actions. So this is the power of the system. We've only really looked at a few different entity types today, but that's what you can do. You can save things as prefabs, even very, very complicated things, as long as those things are just associated with one entity. And that's a big difference between this and like the token attacher prefabs that you guys are used to for me, which I have thousands of those, right? Those are very complicated. It's multiple entities, walls, tiles, sounds, all making like moving ships and all that kind of stuff. Those are very complicated. They attach to a token. What's going on here is mass edit is actually attaching all of the metadata for a single entity, whether it be a tile or a drawing or whatever, and it's associating it and storing it all in journal entries. So let's take a look what I mean by that. So just to walk you through some of the major parts of the interface. You have an import-export function. So whatever you've created, you can export as JSON, either a single thing, right? I can just come in here and just export one thing to JSON, or I can export this entire batch and then share it with friends, import it, that kind of thing. I'll show you here in a second what creators can do, or if you know how to create modules, what you can do as an even better sharing method. But you're also going to get this little gear icon here. And what it's going to do is it's going to say, where do you want me to store all of these locally created prefabs that you're creating for mass edit? And in this case, it's going to default to mass edit presets main. You can go look for this as a compendium and you won't find it. It's actually a hidden compendium. So you can't access it, you can't manipulate it, and that's by design, right? That is the sandbox that contains all of this metadata and it stores it all. But you can see you have other places you can push it. So you can have other journal compendiums that you can push these things to. Now, what you want to do is just make sure that you're only storing mass edit prefab information there, okay? So like what I've done here, we've actually created a dedicated journal under our nuts and bolts module called mass edit prefabs. So anything you see that I've created, I've actually created those for you guys in my free nuts and bolts module. Now, some of these things are tied to premium content, like that CNU overlay that you saw. That's a premium tile. So you have to have my premium modules installed for it to find that tile. It won't just find this texture on its own. But all these ones that are listed as free, and all these other ones like the levels and token magic effects things, those should all be accessible and usable to you. And you can also even play with the free overlays. But by creating modules, then it's also smart enough to say, okay, are there any compendiums that are using mass edit? And it'll detect those and it'll present them down here. You can toggle them on or off here. So anything that I've created that you want to use, you can come in here and do that, right? You can just you can select on these and you can, like, right click and say copy to clipboard. And what that does is it'll create a copy up here. Now you're not seeing that copy created because it already exists, and it already exists using the same ID. So all it's going to do is just copy over onto the same ID. But if you didn't have any of my folders already created, it would copy it all up here for you in your local area. So you can readily tell what all these things are. This is just all of the stuff that you've got here in your local world. Tokens and measured templates, which I don't have any of. Now I'm using it for things on the tile side for things like landing page elements, right? So I want to be able to have things glow when I hover over them. I want to have levels tiles, right? And there's tons of types of levels tiles that I can code into here. I want to have monks active tiles, right? I can have traps and other things that only require a single tile, but I can create all of them here, right? And I've got utilities to be able to just spawn an active tile. And you see here, it's prompting me for which picture I want to use. This is using my active tiles that's in my premium module. Let's say I wanted this picture and I want it to be 100 by 100. It will then spawn that in my world. I'll turn the lights up here so we can see. Now this is just spawned. It doesn't do anything. I could select it and now I can for example, right click on this proximity check. We've all had to do proximity checks, right? It can be relatively complicated. If I copy that to my clipboard and then I hit Control V, now if I open this up, I can see upon click, I run through this proximity check, right? And that's where, if you have a token, that token, it's going to say it's not close enough. And then when I finally get close enough, then it'll allow it through, right? So this proximity check makes it really easy for me to be able to start a tile with that already in place. I can also just spawn a tile, just spawn this regular one here, and I can open up its config, right? Open up its actions, they're blank. And then I've got this spawned tile that I've created over here. And then I can just drag these over. Right. So this lets me, by the way, if I don't just drag them over, you can't just like have one matte tile and then trigger another one underneath it and like basically stack all of your pre-made matte tiles together, because it'll overwrite the previous one. So I just want to drag these over, make sure that they're in the same order. And that's how I can reuse some of the existing work that I've got. As we go down to the pieces themselves and we right click it, we can see that we can edit. This is a really important dialog screen for you because you may find that you need to come in here and make some changes. And I'll show you why here in a second. Um, Depending on how you created the tile. Now, if we did it the way that I showed you before, where we just used the mass edit screen, right, and we use the little box, we can be very specific on what we bring over. And then we can come in here and, like I showed you before, we can change some of that information. But the other way that you can make a tile is you can drag it into this interface, and you can create a preset that way. That's going to copy like all the information on that tile. So let's look at what information it brought over, right? First of all, if we open this up, like all of these are in green, right? So it brought all of these over. But let's look at all of the data. So here's all the data that it brought over from that tile. In fact, let's grab an even more complex one. Let's grab one of these. Here you can see all the data that came over, and you may not want it to have all this data. You may not want it to write over width and height, right? If I delete these, then it won't try to write over those fields when it spawns. You may just want to have this Monk's Active Tile stuff in here, right? So that's why you need to be able to use this screen and understand how to use it so you can delete the things that you don't want and just get down to things that you do want. All right, other things that we've got, we can duplicate it. So if we like this as a starting point, but we want to make some edits, we can duplicate that. Again, we can copy to the clipboard. What that does is just copies all the metadata to your clipboard so that you can then select one or more entities and hit Control V and paste all of that metadata there. Again, you can export just single files as JSON so that you can import them later. Then you can export to compendium. This is where it'll prompt you, hey, which compendium do you want me to put these things into? And you'll notice you can keep the preset IDs. If I as a creator export all of these and I keep the preset IDs, then if you're ever subscribing to my stuff and I say update this proximity tile someday in the future, you can just automatically overwrite my previous one with the new one. So I'll be using this a lot, and then there will probably be some tools coming out soon that will help you kind of manage when you overwrite things or not. So just to give you some more inspiration on other things that you can do, I've got overlay textures, I've got token magic effects, animations, right? So if I want to create something that looks like it's kind of floating, right, I'll select this tile here, and then I will copy the clipboard. And you know what? Since this is outside of the tile range, I can also just use this paint tool. If you have multiple tiles stacked on each other, it'll try to apply it to like all the tiles. Here, I just want to apply it to this one. And it's very, very subtle, but you can just see the animation of this object now floating around, right? But I can apply other effects to these things too, right? Notice if you're in the layer that you are making the changes to, if you hit Control Z, Mass Edit will actually save your history for you, and we'll do that. But these other things, like this one's just hard to remember, like how to make a sprite that rotates on top of something else. It's just hard to remember how to do that, so it's nice that we can build them into prefabs. Other things for drawings, I find myself having to reset the format for my levels stairways when I make them. We also, you just saw Zephyr recently do a tutorial on building regional maps. We can build prefabs for all of the ways that we label and do our regional maps. We can have different kinds of walls. If you've ever had to like use the proximity wall, which is something new in Foundry, we did a tutorial on this, but you can basically have it be where if you walk up to a window, you can't see through the window until you get within a certain, distance from it. It's great, but it's hard to remember. Like, is it reverse proximity? Is it 5 feet? Like that kind of thing. So I just made a wall that just has that information in it, right? And this is everything that I need to know to make that wall work. And I might even get rid of some of these flags just so I don't, accidentally write over some of them. But now I can create windows anytime that I want to that take advantage of that really cool proximity stuff. With lights, sometimes you want torches that are always on. Sometimes you want them that go off at night. Sometimes you want fires, right? Big fires, small fires. If I come down here and let's say I wanted a big fire, can drop this in, and it comes with everything that I need to make it work. It's using, special light animation, the ghostly light and everything else. And that's just a really easy drop-in fire solution, right? Sound beacons, right? So we've all wanted to, a lot of us, I know I do, use like large scale ambient sound beacons. So here's one where I want it to be on all day long, right? And there's certain sounds that I only want on at night or in the daytime. I'm going to go ahead and spawn this in here, and you can see it takes up the majority of the scene. If I click into it, I've got this really great Michael Gelfi ambiance here, if I can find it. Here we go. It's the bio ship. Select that, and it's set to not be blocked by walls, right? It's just a background ambient sound. And you can see my bio ship is pretty bio, right? This is working really well for me. I've got overhead tiles. I've got the textures in place. I've utterly transformed this, right? I've got these squishy door sounds. I am loving everything about this, right? And this definitely feels Baldur's Gate-ish to me. So, beyond that, you can use the other presets and other things to create stuff that you want to create. Now, I do want to show you really quick how to make Token Magic Effects stuff come over. There's actually two ways to do it. The way that you can't use Token Magic Effects is this way, right? So that's got an effect applied to it. If I hit Shift Edit, there's actually not a place where I can capture the Token Magic Effects filters. I can really only capture this Dungeon Draft filter, right? So how do I do it? Well, there's two ways. I can either use method number 2, which is just drag it over here, and we'll say, lights. And then what we want to do is get rid of really everything on this tile, except for, if I can find it, here we go. See, it says Token Magic Filters. It's only a single flag and it contains all of the filter information. So we actually want to delete everything else, right? And that's going to give me a nice clean Token Magic Effects filter that I can apply to other tiles. So let's say apply. So if I select this and I use my paintbrush, notice it applied it. I did have to I had to refresh my scene in order for that Token Magic Effects to reapply. So keep that in mind. The other way I can do it, I just found this out, is if I use my Token Magic Effects edit macro, this is in nuts and bolts. You can see it's got the globes here. And I can, when I open this interface, it's got a box there, and I can actually click that box and I can create a preset. Oh, let's select everything in it first. Now let's create our preset, and we'll call it lights. Let's take a look at the fields. Notice now it breaks out all the fields for me. So now I actually can select certain fields or delete certain fields from the filter itself, which makes me think maybe ADIF can enable that here in the future. So the last thing I'll show you, and this might be just for creators, but for anyone who wants to create these prefabs and you want to give some help, when I right click and I say open journal, remember it opens the journal entry that contains all the metadata, and you can't actually edit this journal entry. But what you can do is add a page to it, and we can call this help documentation. So maybe you have some modules that somebody might require in order to use this particular prefab. Maybe you want to put a link to something, right? You can use all of Foundry's journal editing capabilities to be able to do that. So it's really great that you can have this helpful text and other meta information travel with it. When you export this JSON, for example, or you move things in and out of compendiums, that the pages of its associated journals travel with it. You can test it just by exporting it, opening up, and you can see what you wrote in the journal entry there. So it's really nice to have that as an extra feature. Great for those creators who may want to take advantage of this as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. This is just the ship from outside. It had a landed and a crashed version. And I used all these tools to make these things. So I really enjoy using them. I'm glad that they exist now. I'm going to be using a lot of these more, and we'll build up these libraries for free for most of them, hopefully, so you guys can learn with us. And as the technology advances, we can keep advancing the libraries of things that might come in useful to you. So let me know in the comments if I skipped anything, or if you want me to answer any questions, or if you want ADIF to answer any questions about maybe some of the things I touched on. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoy using the new feature for prefabs from Mass Edit. And in the meantime, have fun making your maps.